welcome everyone to another broadcast of The Soul of the Everyman on the ArtistFirst Radio Network. We welcome your questions and comments by email, dj@artistfirst.com. All past broadcasts are podcasts. You can pick them up at artistfirst.com. Here they are, Michael and Margaret Lyons.
Thank you very much, Z-Man. And I'm Michael Lyons.
And I'm Margaret.
And tonight my voice is not gone, although who knows, might not last much longer, or maybe I'm just being optimistic. But tonight you're in for a treat. Because yesterday was trick or treat, and we thought we could do a trick, but no, we would never trick you people.
Okay.
So tonight, we do this every couple of months or so, but not very often. But tonight is poetry night, much to the dismay of the Z-Man. Actually, Scott loves poetry night.
He got his wish.
Got his wish. So, and tonight we're doing one of our favorites, of course, one of our favorite poets. We have a few in the kind of the, if I say Rolodex, no one will know what that means. But we have a few in our playlist of poets. But Khalil Gibran is one of our favorites, and tonight I think it's an interesting one. So let's just begin with the quote.
Alrighty.
And then we'll just launch.
Alrighty. No human relation gives one possession in another. Every two souls are absolutely different. In friendship or in love, the two side by side raise hands together to find what one cannot reach alone. Khalil Gibran.
Yeah, I bet it's from a longer piece, but I think this probably captures the essence of it. And what struck me, anyway, about this was it echoes many of the themes that we've talked about on The Soul of the Everyman. One, of course, is relationship. And that, when people look for relationships, sometimes they'll end up with a relationship which is asymmetrical, which is unbalanced, where one is looking to, let's say, change the other, or one is looking to take and the other is the one who they'll take from. One is looking to have their needs met and looking for someone to meet those needs. And none of those relationships, and we can think of many, many others that we know of, none of those relationships tend to last. Or if they do last, they become, they become toxic relationships where the dynamic between the people that are in this relationship is not, it isn't conducive to the growth and fulfillment of both. Normally, what happens is one ends up on the losing side, if you will, of the relationship, either being dominated or being used, or many other ways. And these relationships tend to fly apart. If any stress is placed upon them, they don't have a good balance, they don't have a good center. And like an unbalanced machine, they fly apart. They end up in a relationship which does not last. And we've talked about how people will go out looking for lists. They'll have lists of things that they want out of a life partner, and they're almost doing some sort of a checklist as they go looking for that other. Or if they're not doing that, then they're really looking for someone who reflects them. That it's all about me. They're looking like narcissists, looking for the relationship with himself or in the mirror. So these relations are not what Khalil is talking about here. What he's talking about is what we always describe as being the true foundation of any relationship, which is that you enter into it freely and you remain your own unique individual person in full possession of yourself, of your free will.
Mm-hmm. That was the line that struck me as well. No human relation gives one possession in another. And when you look at the way people think of a relationship, the tendency is to believe in possession. The other person is an object at that point that is possessed by the person who acknowledges the relationship. And it's a very simple kind of way of looking at relationship. It's like a small child, and that's my toy.
Mm.
Mine. That's all you get. When the understanding steps in that relationship is between two beings, then it changes completely, because it is not an object. It may be a focus, but it's not an object to be possessed. And the truth of every two souls are absolutely different. Cannot be denied. No two souls are ever alike. And most people believe that you are a unique physical individual. And people have noticed that there are twins or doppelgangers out there that look like you.
Mm.
And it's a physical resemblance, but the soul that's inside, completely different. So it's understanding that you are a very complex being. And frankly, this concept of relationship where the first step seems to be possession, you possess this other person, and then the next step is someone who you meet to grow together with, is very baseline for a human. I believe internally that if you believe yourself to be a possession, in other words, I own me, that's the first step in understanding what relationship is. When you begin to realize that you must grow with you. That is a huge step on the next level. Understanding what it means to be human, not a human thing.
That's very subtle and very, very good. I like that. You know, what you've really said is that your first relationship, in a weird way, is with yourself. And I think that totally would agree in saying that you have to realize that you have to become aware of your beingness or your beinghood. And it's funny because I think you are aware when you're first born, and then you lose that awareness, or it's covered up. And you almost resist, you know, there's a huge movement in the modern world to resist growth and change. We want to stay just exactly as we are because we're already perfect.
Which is a rather interesting thought, because a society that focuses only on staying young and the same is stunted in its growth.
Well, I agree with you, but you went much further, and what I mean to say is that you say that the first thing that you have to understand is you have to have, first you may think of yourself as your own possession, which is wonderful. It's a wonderful thing that I believe is the beginning of awareness, because your free will, you say, I am, you know, a freely determining, you grow into that. as you mature from a child and being dependent, you grow into I am my own possession.
Mm-hmm.
But you can get stuck. This is what I found profound of what you just said. You can get stuck there by saying, well, I don't want to change. I'm already perfect. And the beingness is to become aware that you have a relationship with yourself and that your being, changes.
Mm-hmm.
And that, but some part of you, the interesting thing is the relationship is also with some part of you which doesn't change, but it has nothing to do with the physical or with the experiential or even the emotional or the mental. All that changes, but the being does not. So you begin to have a relationship with the being you. And I think if you come to that, a relationship with your being, a relationship with another being is in some ways much easier. But if you start a relationship with another at the level where you just think, well, I am my own possession, and then you are now my possession. That's where the unfortunate part of relationships can veer off. If you say, well, I own you, you're my this, you're my that, you're my girlfriend, you're my whatever, you immediately place the other in a position of subservience, or at least from the point of view of you are the owner and they are the ownee. Now you can say, well, they have as much right to own me. Yes, that's the beginning of parity, at least, going back and forth. But the true insight in Gibran's words are that no human relation gives one possession in another. That to have any thought within your own person that you own another, their will, their effort, their love, their whatever it is, that you own it, that they owe it to you, is the foundation of the destruction of that relationship. Is the the misunderstanding of the relationship.
Well, it's a stagnation where it does not grow, which would be fine for, say, one party and not so good for the other. And we've all had experiences where you've met a friend from your past, a childhood friend, let's say, and then as you talk, you realize they're still back there.
Yeah.
In the neighborhood that you guys used to hang in. And their mindset is still the same. But you realize that you have changed. And it's always fascinating looking at a person and how they interact with others. In other words, how they treat relationship is a very telling indicator of the state of their soul. Because the soul, the idea that you're possessing a soul, borders on evil. Because you're not giving the other soul freedom or free will. You basically feel you have to tell them to do anything that you say. And that's not what a human being is. So that maturity is absolutely necessary for human development.
Yeah, I want to go back to what you said earlier, too. When you meet someone that you haven't seen them in many years, you had a relationship with them, and you realize when you meet them that that relationship in their mind never changed. And yet, and then let's say you have changed. You've become a different person. The years have changed you. Many experiences have changed you. Now, there's a moment in that when you meet someone, of course, you say, well, this is where we were, but if we're going to continue our relationship, We have to reintroduce ourselves because it's been such a long time. And you may find that this person also has changed, and that you have a newer, deeper, fuller relationship as two people who liked each other many years ago and still do, but in a different way. Why? Because you've allowed for the changes within you, the relationship that you have with yourself, to be reflected in the fact that you say, well, this person, of course, they're different. We can say, oh, we remember that, we remember when, but I like you now. I like you in a different way. But instead, oftentimes what will happen is that person will want you to come back, to fit back into, to not have changed. And this is toxicity too, because when you meet someone many years later and their relationship with you is a box they want you to get back in, that you have to fit in this box and never have changed, and if they were the person who told you what to do, for argument's sake, at that time, or they were the older or the wiser, and now you are, but they can't internalize that. They can't allow that, because that breaks the paradigm. It breaks the paradigm of what? That they haven't changed, that everything, that they were perfect back then and they're still perfect now, that whole thing gets broken. And so you'll find them reacting with anger or with disbelief, or how could you have done this to me? You see it sometimes in parents and children.
Right.
It can be very toxic.
Right.
But you can see it in just friends, relationships. It's like, hey, you're not the same anymore. You used to be fun, you used to be this. You've heard things like this, and the real problem is that they want you to fit into the box because they haven't gotten out of it through whatever reason, fear or who knows what, and what they felt they had with you was a possession. And the fact that possession is now back in their hands, they want it to be exactly the same as it was before. Or it frightens, or it angers, or it engenders this fear that somehow this thing is revealing a maturity and a depth and a growth that they don't understand anymore, can't control anymore. These are the things that you see in toxicity, especially. That's why it's very profound what you brought up. This idea that as a possession, it's also something which I can put in a box and keep, and it's almost like with those. We talked about some other shows, the fragments, traumas that they trap a piece of you. Well, another person can trap a piece of you in some fragment of time that they want you to fit into all the time. Oh, you were always the little one, and you always did this, and I was. But you say, well. You come back and say, well, that's true. That was how many years ago, and I'm different now. They want nothing to do with it. They can't even see it. They can't acknowledge it. Oh, you're just crazy. I always know you're just, come on, just fit right back into my little box and make me happy.
Right. And that's when you realize that the relationship at that point was a possession. You are my friend.
And in my way only.
Right. Well, this is a very defined and distinct mode of behavior, circumstances, words and interactions, phrasing, etc. It's like, well, we did it this way, and you look at that, you're like, okay, so you're still there. All right. Well, you can stay there if you like, but
I wouldn't even accept that.
Well, it's one of those when you realize that if they accept you as you are at that point, then there's a basis to continue. But if they do not, then you have to let them go.
But people will get angry even at that point, when you won't play the game, when you won't be their possession. You can find all kinds of reactions. You can find a sort of a desperation, of sort of an anger. You see this a lot. This is where you see this a lot in close relationships, family relationships. You go back to a family reunion, and Uncle so and so wants you to be the little 5-year-old kid who was running around, and you're like, I'm 37 now, Uncle Tom. I'm the pulling the finger out of the hand joke doesn't work anymore. Well, you always used to like it. Well, and you hate it, right? Well, the reason you hate it is that they want you to not have change because they have a bubble, an unreality bubble that they've been filling up with as much hot air as possible, which is that they haven't changed and that they were comfortable there. And you're bringing the new and changed and different and experiential and matured and whatever person back. They either have to acknowledge that they aren't the same anymore and redevelop a relationship, which can be scary, and you have to allow, and you have to give people power, and you have to give them free will and ability to approve and disapprove. That whole power structure changes.
You have to say that you are my equal.
Yes, and even sometimes even more humbling is you have to say you're greater than I. And you, if you possess something, you don't want any of that. But if you have a real relationship, we talk about this, with your children, for argument's sake, you have to give them their autonomy, and then you have to give them the ability to be freely determining beings. And then you have to redevelop the relationship. And maybe the relationship changes. Maybe you don't see them as much as you wanted to. Maybe you become the dependent. Maybe all these things can happen. Anything. But that new relationship requires only really one thing: the ability to let it change.
Well, it's understanding that as a human being, this is the foundation of our experience down here. Everything changes.
Yes.
Everything changes. And relationships change because you have two distinct souls that are interacting one with the other. And their changes can be in completely different directions, very different rates. But the connection, if it is a true heart-to-heart relationship, makes space for all of it. Because what matters is the heart-to-heart touch. And together, that heart-to-heart touch expands the world, and you begin to see a myriad of different relationships from different perspectives, which is what you are as a consciousness.
See, a lot of what we were talking about, the possession, is ego-based.
Right.
I own you, or I like this box that you used to fit in. This is ego. It comes into power over, power under, but it also just comes into the ego wants to be at the center of attention, wants to be comfortable, it wants to be ever unchanging, and when you present the ego with something that it hasn't pre-approved or hasn't given permission for, the initial reaction is always either fear or anger, and it's so how you probably have heard this over the years. How could you do this to me? How could you change without telling me? How could you do how? This is the ego speaking. This is the pain body in the ego, because the ego doesn't want that to give that freedom. The ego wants control, and to have control over another is a toxic form of a relationship. When you have power dynamics like a family, and you don't want to give those up, the ego says, I like my children to be dependent on me. I like my children to have all the things that they did before and fit in their little room and put on their teddy bears and all. They're 37. You're however old you are. The being that you are must. The ego has been. It has lied to you in the sense of saying that you're not changing, but the being has changed. They've changed. The relationship has changed, but the only part of it that you're denying yourself is that the ego doesn't want it to change.
Well, it's very comfortable. It likes its comfort above all else. And it will disregard anything coming in that disturbs that comfort.
Attack it.
Well, yeah. It's kind of interesting in terms of the mindset of I am my possessions.
Yes, there you go.
So if the possession has changed, then that means it's all an attack on my I am.
Yes, on the ego I am.
Right. So it's a very limited way of looking at who you actually are, because you're a thing as opposed to a being. Possession, which is a very odd, when you think of it, it's like, I don't like the idea of being considered possessed.
And that's it. It's so profound, because the ego, like we said before, the relationship that you have with yourself is I own myself. That's the ego. I own myself. The ego's already torn you into two pieces, the I and the myself. And I can argue with myself, and I can tell myself what to do. I mean, that whole ego construct of a relationship with oneself, where you own yourself, it's seductive. It feels it's a beginning step. You do have to separate that way, right? But if you stay there, the ego begins to have a toxic relationship with time and with change and with any sort of development, where it wants to identify itself with what it likes and reject what it doesn't like, and say, I am powerful, I am rich, I am this degree, I am this accomplishment, I am the greatest of all time, I am a winner, or toxically going the other direction. But the whole ego relationship with oneself is a relationship built on falsehood that denies reality, time, the moment of now. It wants to stay in the place it's comfortable in, and never change, or only change in the way that it wants to change. Oh, I want to be this, but I don't want to be that. The ego expresses all the time, constantly sings the song of, I am perfect the way I am right now. As long as nothing else would change, everything would be just the same. It would be perfect. It's looking for the perfect moment. That's an ego quest, because it doesn't want the perfect moment. It wants to control everything around it and judge it.
Make it a perfect moment.
Make it perfect. Judge it perfect.
The ego wants to make the perfect moment. It doesn't want anybody else involved. It will make the perfect moment. And, perfect for it as opposed to anybody else.
Right. I mean, I'm reminded of those wonderful shows like the Bridezillas and all those things. And, you're trying to make the perfect moment. And you notice the show is delicious because they never can do it. They're always endlessly frustrated and angry at everything because the ego's quest is quixotic, chaotic. You'll never get there, and the ego is doomed, but doesn't care. It still wants to try.
It's a story that it tells itself where it's the main character, and everything is concerning it. And sometimes it's a tragedy, and sometimes it's triumphant.
Right.
It's the story that matters for the ego as opposed to one or the other, which I find fascinating. It's not necessarily, you're going to be having this triumphant moment, because they love to harp on all the tragic things that are unfolding in their lives.
Yes, and it is a tragic time. You know what? Let's take a break here and go back to the studio. And on the other side, we'll talk a little bit more about the real relationships that we should have, not the ego ones. But let's take a little break.
The wait is over. First Blood, Book 2 of the Blood series is out. Your favorite bad boy thief Dev is back, and the beautiful and deadly Trey is right there with him. She is sharp, sexy, and full of surprises. Their adventures continue as a new power arises to threaten the world. The heart of creation is under attack, and time is definitely not on their side as they battle against their enemies' undead hordes. Can they unlock the hidden power that can defeat him, or will his forces draw first blood? Get all 3 installments in the series. Book 0, It's in the Blood. Book 1, Destroyer's Blood, and the new release, Book 2, First Blood, today. Available in ebook and paperback format on Amazon, Kobo, Apple, and most other fine e-tailers.
Moonstones and murder. Real murderers need a heart of stone. Meet Maggie and Mike Heartstone, parents of twin boys, entrepreneurs, and now empty nesters. Mike is retired, not by choice, from his position as chief of police in the picturesque resort town of Hamilton. And now his wife Maggie and her shop, the Cozy Crystal, are their only source of income. When a mysterious killing interrupts Hamilton's famous Springfield Park rock show, the townsfolk, the Cozy Crystal, and their lives are rocked to the core. Can Mike and Maggie figure out who is behind the murderous deeds before the town comes crashing down around them? A touch of romance, a little mayhem, and a whole lot of suspense, along with plenty of comedy and thrills galore. Get your crystal magnifying glass out. It's time for some Moonstones and murder. Available on Amazon, Apple, Kobo, and other fine e-tailers in ebook and paperback. Out soon on Audible. Get your copy today.
There is a Reaper is the story of 5-year-old Christopher Aaron and his life-changing struggle with leukemia. Winner of both the Indie Bragg Medallion as well as the reader's favorite silver medal for memoir. There is a Reaper has more than 100 Amazon book reviews and a 5-star rating. It has been described as life-changing, spiritual, a must-read. Just released on Audible and iTunes, this memoir is also available in paperback and on Amazon Kindle for only 99 cents. Get your copy of this life-changing memoir today.
The Fat Man Gets Out of Bed is the latest book from Michael Lyons, the award-winning author of There is a Reaper. Featuring 13 original stories, this wide-ranging collection has everything. Forbidden love, gods versus demigods, weird invading aliens, sexy seductive artificial intelligence, and unusual passion between the living and the dead. All set amidst fantastic worlds of pain and loss and boundless joy. From the sublime to the macabre to the bittersweet, The Fat Man Gets Out of Bed will leave you breathless with laughter, brimming with tears, trembling with suspense. Available now on Amazon.com, Google Play, iTunes, Kobo, and fine e-tailers everywhere.
Rick Riordan fans, love mythology with plenty of action and humor? Destroyer's Blood is for you. The new fantasy novel by award-winning author Michael Lyons is Book 1 of the adventures of Dev Kalian, the Blood series. Follow Dev and his magic sword Betrayer as they are suddenly attacked and forced to return to Olympus to fight in a war they want no part in. The world of men and gods is about to be destroyed by Zeus's ancient foe, and only Dev and Trey can stop him. The conflict never stops, and the amazing twist will have you on the edge of your seat. Act now while the ebook is on sale for only 99 cents. Destroyer's Blood is available on Amazon.com, Barnes & Noble, iTunes, Kobo, and fine e-tailers everywhere. And while you're there, get the free prequel, It's in the Blood, available for a limited time.
Hi, this is Hannah Ruth from the band Wild Hum. Check out our new Americana Soul CD, Wild Hum, at our website, wildhummusic.com. And you are listening to the Artist First Radio Network. Thank you.
tuning in to the Soul of the Everyman on the Artist First Radio Network. All past broadcasts are podcasts. Pick them up at ArtistFirst.com. Back to your hosts, Michael and Margaret Lyons.
Thank you very much, Z-Man. And we are in the middle of poetry night, but we haven't really read any poetry. Just a little bit of a passage from Khalil. And we are talking really mostly about relationships, and his wonderful passage really nails it, in my opinion. It really has it down. So we've talked about some of the toxicity of relationships, but what he really talks about, the second sentence here, in friendship or in love, the two side by side raise hands together to find what one cannot reach alone, is just beautiful. Just beautiful poetic language for what a real relationship should be like, in friendship or in love. When you meet someone, what begins a relationship? There's a bit of an affinity, and I always say that it's at the heart level. There's a resonance. A real relationship, you find something in that other which gives you pleasure. You find them to be a kind of a nice person to be around. That's the beginning. But as you both go on in the now, in the experiential reality, you are going to change. You are going to mature. You are going to age. You're going to have different experiences. Your relationship should similarly change. And part of the what Khalil says here, if you realize that you don't possess that person, but that you have an affinity, that they are still completely, absolutely different from you. You do not own one iota, one minuscule piece of them. But what you have is a shared energy exchange. We've talked about this, where when you meet another, there's an exchange of energies. You may talk to them or see them, or something may initially attract you to them, their physical form or whatever. But then the true beginning of a relationship is often in a shared experience or in conversation, where you're then giving of yourself and then receiving back from them. And each thing is unique and different, but there's a balance. Now, in any long-term relationship, that you can't just say, well, I gave you 3 things and you have to give me 3 things, because the score, if you will, of who did what for whom will never remain exactly the same, because that's just, life is different, but the exchange of energies, the balance, the enjoyment that you get from the other will change, but should be the foundational sort of it should be the thing which always draws you together. And really good friends, and we've all had this experience, really good friends, time and distance and separate experiences for even many years, you can come back to them and almost immediately renew, not go back, but renew the relationship. And if you've got a true one, you may reminisce a little bit about where you were, but then you want to know them as they are, because this being you recognize as your friend or your lover or your spouse or whomever, and at the heart level you know that a piece of that being hasn't changed a bit. But it's not the physical or the experiential or the mental or the emotional. All those things have changed. Every other piece of them has changed. But the being piece, the piece that is at the basis of the relationship, I recognize you. We have a relationship. And that relationship, that piece, is of the infinite, of the eternal. It's of the now. It never changes.
Mm-hmm. It is the core. Their core resonates with your core.
Mm.
And it doesn't matter what the outside world has done or the physical form has altered in some way. The joy of meeting your friend heart to heart is just, you're here. Ah, you're here.
Yeah.
And it reminds you of, I've often said this, the little babies, when they open their eyes and they see you and you see them, and you just look at each other and smile, like, you're here. It's just wonderful. And it's that simple. You don't necessarily have the conversation, but in that state of sharing, truly discovering relationship, resonating between the two of you, and hitting that joy, there's a fullness there that you can't truly put to words. And then when you need to speak of, well, what have you been doing, is usually the question. That's when it narrows down and then you go into this verbalization. But when you're in that incredible resonance where you're sharing the love, it's like, you're here. I'm here. Oh, it's so good to see you.
Yeah.
It's so good to see you. My heart is seeing your heart. And we're enjoying the flow back and forth. So that line where he says, in friendship or in love, the two side by side raise hands together to find what one cannot reach alone. That resonance is not something that you can do on your own.
Right. Exactly right. You know, this, you could read this in a way that somehow one is higher and together we, but it's truly that. It's that that which the other brings to you is unique to them, and the relationship has its own presence. Your presence is you. Their presence is them. Together, your two presences, interact. In you know, if you abstracted it, there is, you know, if you have a radiant globe and another radiant globe, their radiance is uniquely their own. And no two are the same. You know, every radiant globe, every being has its own beingness. We're all individuals. But when you bring two together into one space, there's a blending of those radiances, and there's a sharing of those radiances. That is unique to the two together. And in and of itself, it has a presence. So when you're with the other, when you have a relationship with the other and you're in their presence, you can feel it. You can feel them. They can feel you. Your current shared experiential now includes their presence. And the resonance changes the now in the same way that your presence changes the now. But the presence of a relationship has its own, you know, you run out of English words that make sense. Together, because you are individual beings, there is a modification, a enhancement of the presence of the two of you by relationship. You can have two beings which have no relationship. They're still two beings. But when you put them together in a relationship, that experiential portion of the now is unique to the two beings that are creating it. You create an experience with the other, the relationship, and the part I'm trying to struggle to get to is that relationship has its own infinity to it. What do I mean by that? That relationship exists beyond your physical life and their physical life. You know you have relationships with people who are no longer physically, corporeally in this universe. But you haven't lost the relationship. You know you can say, I still have a relationship with someone who has passed away. And I know that their presence exists somewhere because that relationship hasn't changed. You can go within yourself and know that that relationship hasn't been broken because you can re-feel it. When you re-enter into the infinite, those relationships will be what draw your experiential beings back together. You know, people say, when you reach heaven, will you meet your relatives? In a childlike sense, yes, but in a true relationship sense, yes, you will, because you'll re-experience a different being relationship in the infinite because you created something unique here between two beings that exists beyond time. There's a lot of words, but you know what I mean?
The phrase you used, which I thought was interesting, was, I have a relationship. Meaning that the possession is not the other soul, but it is the relationship.
Yeah, but I didn't want to say it in possession in the sense of something that you can carry around. It's a change in your being.
No, I understand that, but what
Yeah.
I'm trying to say is that relationship, when the two are resonating and suddenly there is this experience between heart to heart, and it creates this field of resonance, which is actually quite tangible to other human beings.
Yes.
All right. That resonance where you can feel, I feel the love. Okay, it's like the phrase of feels, like it's all the feels.
Yeah.
Well, yes.
Yeah.
This is the best we can do in describing the perception of a great relationship. And it brings incredible joy to the onlooker.
Yes. You can sense that relationship.
Yes, when the heart recognizes the heart, and the joy and the opening and the spaciousness, because the love that enfolds each one is unconditional. Unconditional love does that. It speaks to all hearts on that level. That spaciousness, that joy, the vastness of the love also strikes you. Because there is no boundary on it. It's overwhelming. And one's heart, in observing something like that, cries for joy because of the vastness of it. What it brings to mind is there had been that show that reunited adopted children to their biological parents or biological mother. They were given up for adoption. And they go through everything and they find the mother. And they meet their biological mother for the first time. And these people are in their 20s, 30s, 40s, etc. But the recognition that happens in that moment and the sheer joy that occurs is just the opening. There's an opening of their hearts. And it's like, oh, I've missed you. And it just brings you to tears as you see them just enfold each other in this incredible love. Like, let me just hold you. You're here. Oh, you're here.
Right.
And the gratefulness of the moment. Grateful for the moment that you're here. That's what a human relationship is.
And those relationships were formed in a wordless being state, because an infant, a lot of these kids were given up for adoption when they were infants. An infant has no words. They have no time. There isn't a time thing. There isn't a thing. But that the bond of that relationship is formed in a wordless, heart-to-heart, infinity level. And then how many years go by? 20, 30 years sometimes. And almost without any other, there's no word when these people, I remember this very, very vividly in most of these experiences, that the words were not important. The time was not important.
No.
The relationship was something that they both re-experienced and knew it at a mental
subliminal.
None of that mattered. The relationship, all of a sudden, it's like, yes, there's physical characteristics, but it all was in the heart level. I sense that this is true, that this is actually the relationship I had with this other being at the level of that time. How many years later, how many changes later, boom, the connection is still right there, like it never changed, because that presence, that piece of you that changed, you never lost it. You'll always have it. It's part of your being. Resonance changed your being, and it will go throughout time, because time doesn't matter in the infinite moment. Goes past corporeal existence, and it will always be with you. You've been irrevocably changed at the level of the being by a relationship. Now, isn't that the power of a relationship? Is that it irrevocably changes you. We know this, and as you say, you can sense it. You can look at a TV show. It's not happening right now. It's not in front of you. And yet that resonance that manifests itself is tangible, and that it physically affects your heart.
It's a visceral response.
Yes.
Especially when it is an expression of unconditional love, where for the parent it's like, my baby, my love, the one I've birthed and the one I've given up, or what is good for you. And for the child, it's like, I've yearned for you. I've yearned to see your face. I've yearned to know where I'm from. And all this is primal. This is primal, base, human relationship. And when I say human, I mean spiritual human, emotional human, mental human, all incorporated in one, because the whole being is in that moment.
Right.
All of them is there. They're
Right.
not off thinking about what coulda, or woulda.
Right.
It's no. The hole in my heart, I'm seeing that which will fill it.
Right. I mean, and there's so many things where they say, "Well, I thought you would be mad at me," and none of that matters. All those mental constructs and ego constructs and things, all that falls away. So before we get too far in, the being, the relationship changes the being. The relationship becomes part of your being. The relationship is as infinite as your being. And what you're reaching here, you could never have had the same relationship with any other being. The relationship with one being to another is in and of itself unique. You've made a unique modification to your being. You've allowed the most dangerous thing in the world, in the universe, is allowing yourself to have a relationship with somebody else. Because once you have allowed it, you have irrevocably changed yourself. You'll never reach that without that other. You will feel the lack of that relationship. Because if you wish to have it, you must find the other. You must be with the other. You don't have to physically be with them, but you have to be with them to have that relationship. It's profound. And
when you say be with them, what matters is the resonance of the heart.
Exactly.
To resonate with another being in that moment of now and the gratefulness that arises from it. And we have reached the end of our hour.
It's that moment of now.
Mm-hmm.
So for the future, we'll have this relationship again. But for now, I'm Michael Lyons.
And I'm Margaret. And thank you for listening.